All right, Class 2A, Week 7. A lot of shakeups this week in the rankings. They don't look anywhere near the same as they did a couple weeks ago. And a lot of, just really exciting teams. And this is a class. This is a class where there's really no certainties. Carlisle looks like the best team right now. They have to play a tough opponent this week, and we'll get to that later. And they're going to have to face a lot of different looks from a lot of different teams that maybe they haven't seen yet. I don't know if they've seen a passing attack like Poen has, but they look really good. They look like the favorite right now. Conway Christian undefeated as well. Those are the only two undefeateds in the class, and Conway Christian narrowly survived a rising Mount Ida team, and we'll talk about that here in just a second. Before we do, go ahead and if you haven't already, subscribe to us right here on YouTube. Hit the notification bell if you want to be notified when anything from the Arkansas Sports Network comes out on our YouTube channel, whether it's our Game of the Week live stream or this show, the ASN Ranking Show, or if it's Duran Miller's show, Grilling the Razorbacks. We have all kinds of content right here on the Arkansas Sports Network for everybody to check out. Let's go ahead and get into the rankings here. Of course, number one remains unchanged, the Carlisle Bison. The Bison led by freshman quarterback Ty Tanksley and running back Jaden Elliott. And then, of course, on the outside, Gavin Davis at receiver. And they got some studs on defense as well. Of course, Gabe Boyle is their leader on the defensive side of the ball. The senior has been playing senior high for 4 years. Shows you how talented he is. They've just got all the momentum in the world right now, and that might play to their advantage. From what I've heard, when they played Des Arc, it could have been much closer, but Des Arc shot themselves in the foot a couple times on some good drives. So maybe if that's not the case, then Des Arc could have been looking at a much closer game. I mean, if Des Arc scores twice instead of shooting themselves in the foot, that's a 20 to 30 or 24 to 30, something like that kind of game. And a lot of really interesting scenarios that you could play out with those kind of things. But I do think that that 8 to 30 score was not indicative of what that game could have been like. With that being said, Carlisle is still the front runner. They've like I said, they have all the momentum in the world. In my opinion, they play in the least tough conference in the class. That 4 seed for that conference, like I say every week, is going to be really interesting. And the 4 seed from that conference will play whoever wins the 2A1 conference. And really interested to see Mount Ida and Bigelow when that one comes around. I think that if Mount Ida beats Bigelow, I think it's Conway Christians to lose. If Bigelow beats Mount Ida, we're going to have a really interesting Week 10 matchup with the Eagles and the Panthers, as it has been the past 2 years. Speaking of the Eagles, we'll go ahead and move on to our number 2 team, Conway Christian. The Eagles, led by Jaron Thomas, Brady DeMarcus, Bryce Keithley. They've got a lot of really, really talented players on that team. I think, looking at the bracket right now, if things stay the same, they would match up with Carlisle in the semifinals. And those might be the 2 most talented teams, the 2 best teams in the class. Two of the best coached teams in the class are Carlisle and Conway Christian. And they've got all the talent in the world to work with. So I think those, in my opinion, those are the 2 best teams in the class. That's just the way it's looked. Will Des Arc make a play for it? Absolutely. Will Junction City make a play for it? Absolutely. I think there's a lot of beyond that. There's a lot of interesting conversations to be had after after Mark Tree's loss to Des Arc last week, and I'll talk about that a little bit more when we get to those teams. But Conway Christian this week takes on Mountain Pine. That game is a little bit intriguing. Mountain Pine's a team that moves up from 11 man to 8 man this week, or excuse me, this year. Um, and they look like um, they're up some weeks and they're down some weeks, and some weeks they play really well. I mean, I believe against Hector, who's a pretty talented team and will probably make the playoffs. Um, I believe they were up at the half 12-0, and I might be wrong about that. Um, but nevertheless, still a really interesting matchup this week because there's not a whole lot of certainty with Mountain Pine. So we're going to move on to Desark here. Desark last week got a huge victory at home over the Mark Tree Indians. Desark, I think, looks improved from when they started this season to now. Of course, that's usually a given with most teams, but I think it's extremely prominent with Desark. Hudson Goodman is their starting quarterback. He looked really good. If you want to go back and watch our ASN game of the week last week between Mark Tree and Desark, it is still up on our Facebook and YouTube channel. So go ahead and go check out that matchup if you want to learn more about those two teams. Really highly suggest watching it. Brad, Duran, and Alan and that crew, of course, Aaron and Chase, they did a great job putting on that game last week. So I highly recommend it. People go out and check out that live stream because I thought it was a really good game and a really good, really good atmosphere at Desark. Let's move on to number 4, Junction City. This is one of the more wild card teams in the class. I think that if Junction City can figure it all out, they're extremely dangerous. And even when they don't have it figured out, they're pretty dangerous as well. They've got a lot of very, very talented players. Taylon Owens, Dominique Grimes. And you could just keep, Penister's really good. And you could keep throwing names out there. But I think that they've got to figure out a way to really just put it all together. And I've said that week in and week out. They're going to face some tough opponents down the stretch. Dirks and Murfreesboro are among them. I think that the 2A3 comes down to Murfreesboro and Junction City at this point after Murfreesboro beat Dirks last week. But I think that there is still an opening for Murfreesboro if they wanted to go in and try to secure that conference. I believe Murfreesboro's only losses were to 3A teams, one of them being Falk, who has been completely on fire. But I also think that one of the really, really X-factor teams in the entire class is Junction City. You got to watch out for them. They're fast, they're athletic, they're big. They've got all the makings of a really fantastic football team. They have a very deep roster. So they're going to be a team to watch out for down the stretch for sure. But I think it comes down to playoff matchups for Junction City as to what the end of their season will look like. I'd have to go back and look at the bracket, but if they're in that top bracket, that doesn't have Carlisle and Conway Christian as it stands now, of course, things can change. But as it stands now, Carlisle and Conway Christian would both be in the bottom bracket as the top seeds according to our rankings. So really, if Junction City, and I don't remember the bracket exactly, but I do believe Junction City's in that top bracket. I think that because they're in that top bracket, they don't have to face Carlisle or Conway Christian. They can make a really solid run for it, for the state title. I think that they're going to be a really, really dangerous team down the stretch. Number 5, Mark Tree. The concern with Mark Tree is their line of scrimmage. Hasn't been a whole lot of an issue in the past 2 years. Of course, TJ Hodges had a fantastic game. but they're not going to give him time to make anything happen in the backfield. Um, they're not going to give Kenyon Carter time to throw. He's having to scramble all the time. And like I said, go back and watch our game with Mark Tree and Desart. You can see a lot of the line of scrimmage problems that Mark Tree has. Now, if they can find a way to get their line of scrimmage under control, where they can handle some of the better pass rushes and some of the better front sevens in the game, or if they can handle some of the better run games in the class with their defensive line, they're going to be set up as a top contender. But until they get their line of scrimmage fixed, I think that's going to be their Achilles heel, and I don't know how deep you can make it in the playoffs without a deep line of scrimmage. There's a reason that SEC teams and now teams like Oregon and I used to say Texas, but now they're in the SEC. A lot of teams that are really good, you see them build from the line of scrimmage out. If you don't have a good line of scrimmage, if you don't have a good offensive and defensive front, you're not going to be a very successful football team. You can have all the skill guys in the world. If you don't give your quarterback time or your running back time in the backfield, it's not gonna do a whole lot for you. So Mark Tree's got to get that figured out. Speaking of teams with a good line of scrimmage, number 6, the Mount Ida Lions. Mount Ida, I've gotten a chance to watch them. You can go back and watch the game that I called for Conway Christian against them when we played them at home on a Thursday 2 weeks ago. 1-point game, came down to the wire. They've shown that they can compete with the best. Their only loss this season is to 3A Jessieville, aside from their loss to Conway Christian. And that was a 1-point loss. Again, maybe if they go to Ben Woodfield on that 2-point conversion, they win the game. But, their quarterback got stopped on a quarterback run to end the game. Conway Christian won, stopped their 2-point conversion. And I'm sure they've had 100 what ifs in their head about that game. Coach White is going to have his team prepared week in and week out. There's no doubt about that. And since the beginning of the season, they've been one of the biggest risers in our rankings. Personally, I think that they're a semifinal type team. They've got all the makings of a classic Mount Ida football team. They have an elite running back in Ben Woodfield. They have a quarterback in Dakota Beachy who knows that offense really well. And he's a really talented runner as well, physical runner. Ben Woodfield is a physical runner, but I think he's more strong as a finesse type guy. But either way, he's going to find a way to get yards. I think that Mount Ida is one of the more talented line of scrimmage teams in the class. They've got so much size up front, so much physicality, and they have to run in the veer. I think that, and they've got, if they can beat Bigelow, they're going to be the number 2 seed in the conference, in my opinion. We'll see how it all shakes out. Of course, there's no certainties, as we found out. But, Mount Ida, a team to watch out for down the stretch. They've got a lot of good that they have working for them right now. Number 7, Poen. Poen is led by quarterback Colt Barrett and head coach Vic Barrett. Colt Barrett threw for 403 yards last week, an exceptional passing performance from the junior quarterback. I've gotten to see him play in person. Of course, that was last season in the playoffs. He's just got such a talented arm. He's got all the arm strength in the world. He's able to put it right where the receiver can get it and nobody else gets it. So many throws that I watched him make in that playoff game last year as a sophomore that I was really impressed with. And he's about 6'6", so he can see over the defense. And he's got all the natural talent in the world. Now, can his receivers come up big? Can his line protect for him? It's all about the surrounding pieces. They do play Carlisle this week, and I'll talk about that game a little bit more in depth in a little bit. That's going to be a tough challenge for them. They've looked better week by week. beat England 20-14 early in the season, and then beat Hazen recently, who beat England by 22 points. I don't know how it's going to translate. I think that game against Hazen was their best game of the season by far, and they're 5-1. Their only loss came against Class 3A Magnet Cove, so they haven't lost to a 2A team yet. I think that Powen's got all the makings of a fantastic football team that could make a playoff run. I really liked them at the beginning of the season because I thought Colt Barrett was one of the best quarterbacks in the class. He's up there with the Kenyon Carters and the Jaron Thomases and even Ty Tanksley as a freshman is making a name for himself. I think that he's just got a lot of really, really natural talent, really good natural talent. I think he's going to be tough to stop down the stretch if some teams don't learn how to defend the pass. Number 8, McCrory. McCrory making a play for the 2A2. That conference is going to be a cluster down the stretch. I think Cross County is going to be the team that throws a wrench in that entire conference. Of course, with their win over East Poinsett County this week, Coach Van Pascal's crew, they just if they've got to find a way to pull off a couple of upsets. Mark Tree and Des Arc, and so. That's going to be an interesting team to watch down the stretch. I'll say that. McCrory is a team that we were really high on at the beginning of the season. They had a really, really strong start and just ended up coming out a little sluggish recently. And but I think that they're going to have, if they can show down the stretch that they're improving every week, they're going to be a tough team to handle come playoff time. Number 9, Murfreesboro. Murfreesboro is going to be physical. They're going to have a fantastic defense. I know there are some people at ASN that think that Brad Cheshire is one of the best coaches in the class. I would probably agree with that sentiment. Some have even gone to the extent that he's the best coach in the class. I do think that he is a fantastic coach defensively. I might put him in that category as the best defensive coach in the class, just based on the numbers that they put up last season. It's hard to argue with that. But so many good coaches in this class, it's hard to just put one in that category. Of course, you can make the argument for Coach Wilson at Carlisle he's one of the best defensive minds as a head coach in the class. He was defensive coordinator at Carlisle for a number of years before being promoted to head coach. And he's got his group rolling now on both sides of the football. But Murfreesboro, with a big win over Dirks in conference, they're setting up a big matchup with Junction City that will probably decide the conference. Dirks, number 10, we'll move on to them real quick, and then we'll get to our game picks. Dirks looks like a really, a team that is really electric offensively, but they got stopped by a tough Murfreesboro defense. Dirks is not usually a team that's going to get out-physicaled. They're always a very physical football team, but when they play teams like in the past, Mount Ida, recently with Murfreesboro, these teams that aren't, that are coming in and they're expecting to be the more physical team, Dirks has struggled a little bit with that. I know they were going to have some offensive line troubles, just replacing some guys from last season. But Dirks, I think, is a team that can make some noise down the stretch. We'll see how it goes when they play Junction City and Mineral Springs and teams like that. But they've got a long road ahead of them in the rest of their schedule. All right, games and game picks for this week. I want to start with the big one, and this one could decide the 2A. Probably will decide the 2A4 conference. Powen versus Carlisle. I think this game, it's going to be a tough one. It's at Powen. That really helps the Indians. But Carlisle has been on their game and they've been playing at a really high level from start to finish this season. Ty Tanksley, the more he plays, the better he looks. And my concern earlier in the season was that maybe, he might not be able, as a freshman, he might not be able to hold up the entire season. That hasn't been the case. He's proved me wrong on that. He's looked better every week. Had a great week last week. I believe they played Hampton, and they put up 54. He looked as good as ever. Um, I think he went 7 for 7 passing for like 175 yards, 200 yards, something like that. We made a post about it on our Twitter page, so go check it out if you want to know for sure. But he looked really good. He looks good and looks better every week. He's got insane accuracy, insane big playability. It's hard to pick against Poen with how good they've looked, but it's harder to pick against Carlisle. So I'm going to go with the Bison in a tough game this week. East Poinsett County versus Earl. It's at Earl. Earl is a team that came out and put the hammer down on Mariana last week, won 62-0. East Poinsett County, though, I'm going to have to pick to get the victory in this game. I think that Earl has the bad fortune of playing in the toughest conference in the state as far as 2A goes. Played a fantastic game against Mark Tree, almost pulled off the upset before Mark Tree ended up pulling away and winning 24-20. But I think that they can play with the best, but I don't know that they get the victory this week. I'm going to pick EPC, but don't be surprised if Earl pulls off a victory. England versus Clarendon. Clarendon just hasn't looked very good all season. That's a program that always seems to have talented players. I think Coach Courtney is their guy, but I don't know that. I think this season is going to be a rebuilding year for them. We had some higher expectations for them coming into this season, but a lot of things just haven't gone their way so far. I do think they have a chance down the stretch to play better and show that they are a really solid team. But England this week, I think, is going to be too much for them to handle. England gets the victory this week. Mark Tree versus McCrory. This game is at Mark Tree. Don't be surprised if McCrory gets the victory here. I would be surprised if Mark Tree's line of scrimmage is better than McCrory's. That's going to be the big struggle for Mark Tree all season, is their line of scrimmage. I'm extremely tempted to pick McCrory here, but I think TJ Hodges is just too talented of a back. I'm going to pick Mark Tree to get the victory in a very close and potentially very high-scoring game this week. Gurdon and Mineral Springs. Gurdon is a team with a lot of history. It's a very historic program. Coach Jackson there does a fantastic job with his players. Always has them prepared every week. He's been there for a while, knows the program inside and out. But it's really hard to pick against a really athletic Mineral Springs team, so I'm going to have to pick the Hornets to get the victory this week. But don't be surprised if Gurdon keeps it really, really close down the stretch. Gurdon has a really good line of scrimmage. Magazine versus Johnson County West Side. Game is at Magazine. Both of these teams beat Cedarville earlier in the season from Class 3A. I'm going to pick Magazine in a close game. Both teams are 1-4. It's going to be a game that's going to really help their season. I don't know that it's going to help either team make the playoffs. I think that the 4 is almost set in that conference with Hector, Bigelow, Mount Ida, and Conway Christian. I think Magazine gets the victory. I don't know if there's a whole lot to say about this one. Both teams are in rebuilding stages. I'm going to go with the Rattlers to win this game. Lafayette County versus Murfreesboro. I'm going to pick Murfreesboro to get the victory in this game. I think they're way too physical for Lafayette County, even though I think Lafayette County has a pretty good line of scrimmage on both sides of the ball. I just think that Murfreesboro plays so physical every week. Coach Cheshire always has them prepared. Defensively, they've got all the talent and all the X's and O's in the world. I'm going to pick them to get the victory this week. I think they're one of the favorites in that conference. I think they're going to prove why this week. Junction City and Dirks, another team or another clash from the 2A3. This can be a huge test for Junction City, having to go to Dirks. That's a hostile environment. I think that Junction City gets the victory. I think that Junction City is just going to be too fast. Speed is going to be too much for Dirks to handle. The Dragons get the victory in this game. Mount Ida and Hector. This is going to be a very this game is tough. Hector's a team that looks a little bit down this year, and down for Hector apparently is still 4-2. But you can tell when you watch them that they're not the same as they were when Jackson Taylor and PJ Henderson and Drake Riley and some of those guys were there. I'm going to pick Mount Ida to get the victory at Hector this week. It's going to be a tough game for Hector to defend the run. In the past, they've struggled to defend the run a little bit, and their line of scrimmage just hasn't been up to par with some other teams. I'm going to pick Mount Ida to get the victory in this game this week. I think they're going to have a lot of rushing yards, and that's the reason I'm picking Mount Ida over Hector. Do I think Hector could maybe burn Mount Ida in the passing game? Yeah, maybe a little bit, but I don't think it's going to match up with what Mount Ida can do on the ground. Spring Hill and Foreman, tough seasons for both of these programs. Both of them seem to be in rebuilding stages. Of course, Spring Hill moving from 11-man to 8-man. I'm going to pick Spring Hill to get the victory this week against Foreman at Foreman. Des Arc and Izard County. Des Arc is going to roll big time in this one. Expect a lot of yardage on the ground. They might not throw past the whole game. They're going to move to 6-1. Izard County is a team that is struggling with the transition from 8-man to 11-man this season. Cross County and Mariana. I'm going to pick Cross County to get the win over winless Mariana. Cross County, they're a team and a program that is really, really going to look really good over the next couple of years with Coach Pascal. They're 4-2 this season. I don't think people give them enough credit for how well they've done. I think they're a team that could throw. They're going to be the one to throw a wrench in that conference in the 2A2. But that conference is going to be a huge cluster. Anybody can win any week. I'm going to pick Cross County, though, to get the victory over Mariana this week. Mountain Pine and Conway Christian. I think Conway Christian is going to roll big in this one. Conway Christian is a team that there's no weaknesses on either side of the ball. Defensive line, all-state defensive end, Garrison Greer. On the back end, safety, Bryce Keithley is the anchor of that defensive secondary. Inside, you have Bo Campbell, the all-conference linebacker, and Colton Loper is super physical. On the outside, Brady DeMarcus is a great defensive leader. He's a guy that's got so much stamina. It's hard to keep him off the field just because he's so talented. I'm going to pick Conway Christian to get a victory in a big time win this week. Bigelow and Mountainburg. Bigelow, I'm going to pick to get the victory this week. They're 4-2. I think they're another team that people aren't giving enough credit to. They're the defending state champions. Their only loss so far, I believe, is to 3A schools, Mayflower being one of them. And I think that they do have the potential to be to upset the apple cart in that conference, but I don't know. I don't know that they're just not the same as they were last year. They don't have the same offensive firepower. Their defense is probably still similar, but I don't know that they have the offensive firepower to contend with teams like Conway Christian or maybe even Mount Ida. And I'm going to pick Bigelow to get the win over Mountainburg this week. Bearden versus Hampton. This is a game that could decide the 4 seed in that conference. Bearden 3-3, Hampton 3-3, games at Hampton. I am going to pick Bearden, however, to get the victory in this game this week in a tight game. Hazen and Baptist Prep. I'm going to pick Hazen to get the victory this week. Baptist Prep has not won a conference game yet. Hazen's a team that we thought was going to be pretty sluggish this season. They've come out and they've looked better pretty much every week. Had a tough loss last week against Poen and Colt Barrett. That's just the Colt Barrett effect. I mean, he just came out and worked super hard in the offseason, and obviously he's gotten better. But Hazen, I think, is a team down the stretch that could really contend. I think in that conference, England, Hazen, Carlisle, Poen are going to be the four at the end of the season. Maybe Bearden and Hampton will have something to say about that. Baptist Prep, maybe, if they can get back to their form that they were at earlier in the season where they were looking really good offensively. But I think that they're just, struggling a little bit so far this season and in conference play. But Hazen's going to get the victory, in my opinion, this week. That's going to wrap it up for Class 2A this week, our Class 2A rankings. Again, don't forget, if you haven't already, subscribe to the Arkansas Sports Network. Follow us on Instagram, X, and Facebook. Until next time, for the ASN Ranking Show, I'm Carson Ward, signing off.